The most successful outfit labor racketeer in Chicago was Giuseppe Lielmi, a.k.a. Joseph Glimko. Glimko got involved in the union rackets in the late 1920s, and by the time Al Capone went to prison, Glimko had become a top outfit union slugger. By the time he was 25 years old, he was arrested over 20 times. In 1928, the outfit murdered the top Irish labor racketeer, Timothy Big Tim Murphy. After he was murdered, Murray the Camel Humphreys became the outfit's man in the labor rackets here in Chicago. In 1934, under new boss Frank Nitti, Humphreys and Glimko had taken control of the poultry drivers, fish handlers, and filleters unions, and they were also extorting the Fulton Street and Randolph Street poultry merchants for the outfit. In 1943, Glimko began to move in on a large number of labor unions here in Chicago, and in 1951, he and the outfit turned their focus towards taking over the 5,000-strong taxi drivers local 777 and the poultry drivers union. Glimko was elected secretary-treasurer of Local 777, and it became the seat of power in organized labor racketeering in Chicago for nearly 2 decades. In the late 1940s, Jimmy Hoffa began expanding his political base within the Teamsters and ran alongside David Beck, who was challenging incumbent Teamsters president Daniel Tobin. Hoffa needed to gain control of the large amount of union delegates in the locals across Chicago. And to do that, he needed Glimko's help. And Glimko and Paul Red Dorfman, president of the Chicago Waste Handlers Union, took care of business for Hoffa. In 1952, Glimko and Rika brokered a deal with Hoffa to get Midwestern drivers to vote for Beck. In exchange, Glimko would receive unlimited access to Local 777's finances, and this increased his power in the outfit. In 1957, Jimmy Hoffa became president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. This move by Glimko set the stage for the outfit's access to the Central States Teamsters Pension Fund and their eventual investment in Las Vegas. In 1954, a top Chicago Teamster leader said, "Glimko is the outfit. When he opens his mouth, it's the outfit talking." The feds have been investigating Glimko since 1943 and would not let up for nearly 3 decades. He appeared before multiple congressional hearings on labor racketeering, and in April of 1952, Glimko attended a meeting of top Chicago outfit leaders at the home of Tony Spilotro to discuss the status of chief labor racketeer Murray the Camel Humphreys. He was having health problems, and for this reason, he was shelved by the bosses, and Glimko was named his successor. When Paul Rika, Tony Spilotro, or Sam Giancana wanted to take over a union, they called on Joey Glimko and sent out infiltrators in muscle. Joey Iuppa, Jackie Cerrone, John Lardino, Louis Romano, and many others to coordinate bombings and drive-by shootings to intimidate union leaders and business owners. Sometimes it could be as easy as an election within the union to put an outfit-connected guy on the ballot. He wins and then staffs the local with his own, then moves from within to take control of the union and then the funds. Over the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, the outfit took control over union locals representing truck drivers, dockmen, the building trades, bartenders, waitresses, restaurant and hotel workers, movie operators, and local after local fell under the control of the outfit. 1958 was the start of tough times for Local 777. The Democrat Union Organizing Committee, the DUOC, announced they were going to push the Teamsters out as the union representing Chicago taxicab drivers. And this was because of the outfit involvement and theft by union leaders. A war raged for the next 6 years throughout the two elections, and assaults, bombings, shootings, arsons happened across the city. It was described as a wave of terror in Chicago. In 1959, elections were held to determine which union, the DUOC or the Teamsters, would represent the drivers and mechanics at Yellow Cab Company and Checker Cab Company. On July 19th, nearly 5,000 cab drivers and cab company mechanics voted to get rid of Teamsters Local 777, and the Teamsters were pushed out. After the second contract expired, a second election was held in April of 1965, and 6,000 cab drivers and mechanics voted to continue their representation with DUOC. After Glimko's second loss, his power within the outfit started to decline. He was able to hold on to power of Local 777. After 2 defeats and multiple Senate investigations and multiple court cases, it took its toll. And Glimko's 45-year run had come to an end. By the 1960s, the outfit bosses, mainly Accardo, seen the writing on the wall. Labor racketeering was causing a lot of unwanted heat from the FBI, and the numerous Senate investigations shed way too much light on the outfit and their other rackets. By the mid-1960s, the bosses decided to replace labor racketeering with the Vegas skim. So they took one big last run at the Central States Teamsters Pension Fund, and they withdrew nearly $70 million in loans and financed 4 casinos in Las Vegas. The truth is, Joey Glimko's decades of labor racketeering and helping Hoffa get elected led to the access of the Teamsters pension funds for the outfit. Glimko was close personal friends with Paul Ricca and Tony Accardo until their deaths. Tony Accardo knew how big Glimko's contribution was to the outfit and the Teamsters. And I believe that is part of the reason why Joseph Glimko was allowed to keep his union and fade away. This was a gift from the outfit to Joey Glimko for all his hard work. Giuseppe Lielmi, a.k.a. Joseph Glimko, died on April 28, 1991, in Berwyn, Illinois. He was laid to rest at Queen of Heaven Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois.
Put it in a sealed envelope and send it back to Joe. Got a message to bring back. You sealed envelope, and you get it, you bring it to me. I don't want to hear nothing about it on the phone.
For decades, the mob skimmed millions upon millions of dollars from Las Vegas casinos, enriching themselves and crime syndicates across the country. And over that same time period, 3 federal investigations were launched that would eventually lead the feds to the Teamsters Pension Fund, shady loans, and the Vegas skim. In 1974, Joey Lombardo, Allen Dorfman, Tony Spilotro, and 3 others were indicted and charged with defrauding the Central States Teamsters Pension Fund of $1.4 million. This money belonged to hard-working American truckers and dockmen. It was a complicated case for the feds to prove because it involved multiple companies and thousands of bookkeeping records. But a cooperating witness came forward and made things a lot easier for the feds. Daniel Seifert, a 29-year-old Chicago businessman, got involved with Chicago mobsters through businessman and mob associate Erwin Weiner. He offered to help Seifert finance a business after overhearing him talk about how much money he was making by working with fiberglass out of his garage. Under the arrangement, Weiner would put up 1/3 of the seed money, Seifert 1/3, and a man named Felix Milwaukee Phil Aldericio would put up the rest. A few years later, Wiener announced that he was selling his part of the business to some associates, Tony Spilotro, Frank Schweiss, and Joey Lombardo. In 1973, Seifert got out and sold his part of International Fiberglass, and later opened Plastic-Matic in Bensonville. He was well aware that Lombardo and his associates were laundering stolen Teamsters pension fund money through the business. Seifert had been approached by FBI agents and agreed to testify in a fraud case against Lombardo, Spilotro, and other gangsters. When Lombardo found out, he and Frank Schweiss, John Feckerata, and Joey Hansen moved against Seifert. In 1974, Seifert and his wife and 4-year-old son stopped by his plastic factory, Plastic-Matic Products in Bensonville. 4 men suddenly appeared wearing ski masks, and they had guns. Emma Seifert was attacked in the office by Lombardo and Schweiss. After they pushed her and her son into the bathroom, the shooting began. At this time, Daniel Seifert was out back taking something out of the car, and that's when he seen the 2 other gunmen, John Feckerata and Joey Hansen, coming at him. Seifert briefly fought back. Then he started to run for his life through the parking lot. The gunman fired several shots, then Seifert went down. And then gunman Joey Hansen walked up and fired the final shot at point-blank range to Seifert's head. The shooters jumped into 2 cars and took off. Then a high-speed chase by Bensonville police started after they spotted the car driven by John Feckerata. But after some fancy maneuvering, Feckerata got away from cops. And that was that. Daniel Seifert was now dead, and the Fed's case collapsed. And Lombardo, Spilotro, and the other 4 co-defendants were acquitted. And Lombardo and Spilotro went right back to skimming off the Las Vegas casinos. And the Feds were still listening in. In 1979, just 1 year after the burglary of Ricardo's house, the Feds launched Operation Pendorf. They were coming for the outfit banker Allen Dorfman. Dorfman's father was Paul "Red" Dorfman. He was the head of the Chicago Waste Handlers Union and a kingpin in the outfit. And he was the connection to Hoffa that gained Dorfman access to Hoffa and the Teamsters pension money. In 1959, Red Dorfman was described by congressional investigators as the link between the Teamsters Union and the outfit. Allen Dorfman was under Grand Avenue crew capo Joey Lombardo's control. In the early 1970s, Dorfman became the new link to the Teamsters pension fund that was giving millions in loans to frontman Alan Glick for his outfit Front Argent Corporation. These loans set up their Vegas skim operations in 4 hotels: the Stardust, the Marina, the Fremont, and the Hacienda. The Feds were hot on Dorfman's trail, and they installed a hidden microphone in his insurance agency office, and information obtained from the wiretaps were taken directly to a federal grand jury in Chicago. And they indicted and then convicted 4 of the 5 defendants. They were convicted for conspiring to bribe Nevada U.S. Senator Howard Cannon. Roy L. Williams, president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, received 55 years. Allen Dorfman never made sentencing. Joey Lombardo got 15 years. Thomas O'Malley got 30 months, and Andrew Massa got a year. Massa and O'Malley were Teamsters pension fund trustees, and the land deal they tried to set up would be purchased using Teamsters pension funds. It was clearly a bribe they thought would lead to Cannon scrapping trucking deregulation legislation that was slated to go before Senator Cannon's Transportation Committee. The Teamsters did not want this legislation to become law. No charges were ever brought against Senator Cannon. And it would just so happen during these indictments, my mother was the personal secretary to Tom O'Malley at CW Transport Trucking Company in Bridgeview. And there was much more on those wiretaps that the feds were trying to figure out. On January 23, 1983, 3 days before his sentencing, Allen Dorfman was murdered in the parking lot outside the Lincolnwood Hyatt. Dorfman was murdered by the bosses to keep him from cooperating with authorities because he was facing a possible 55-year prison sentence, and they felt he would fold on them and fully expose the outfit's Las Vegas skim deal, worth $5 million a year in revenue, that was going directly to the outfit bosses. Dorfman was whacked in a brazen mid-afternoon shooting. 2 men approached Dorfman and his friend in a parking lot and yelled, "This is a stick-up." One of them drew a .22 caliber pistol and shot Dorfman several times in the head, killing him instantly. The day Dorfman was killed, he was with longtime friend Erwin Weiner, a known associate of many Chicago outfit figures. Weiner was a money man for the outfit. He had just gotten off on fraud charges along with Dorfman and Tony Spilotro. They were acquitted after key government witness Daniel Seifert was killed. Weiner was not injured in the shooting, even though he was a witness. And when does the outfit ever leave a witness behind? Never. Unless he was in on it. And it seems to be true in the outfit that it's always the one you would least expect and is the one closest to you that assists or carries out murder. And just like that, the Fed's best chance at getting to the skim was murdered that day in Lincolnwood. Frank Schweiss and Anthony Penzica have long been the top suspects in the murder of Allen Dorfman. By the late 1970s, the feds now knew cash from casinos was being routed to crime families in the Midwest. But they couldn't use the information they had because the FBI obtained this information by illegally bugging casino count rooms, and this led to strategically placed wiretaps. And these wiretaps definitively confirmed the mob had control of the count rooms in Vegas casinos. In 1978, the feds were investigating a local murder by Kansas City mobsters. The FBI operation was called Straw Man. More evidence of the skim in Vegas was overheard at the Marlowe House in Kansas City. This home was the site of a 1978 meeting between the Savella crime family members and Tropicana Hotel Casino executive Carl Thomas. The meeting was secretly bugged by the feds, and Thomas revealed how the skim worked inside Nevada casinos. And this was the second confirmation on the skim. There was an internal war brewing in the Kansas City crime family that led to deadly violence in the 1970s and 1980s. And because of this, the FBI got involved. And during their investigation on mob murders, an informant told agents the Spiro Tavern killing was being discussed in a restaurant. So FBI agents went before a federal judge and he authorized installation of a hidden microphone at that particular table in the Villa Capri restaurant in Kansas City. And immediately the feds hit the jackpot. Agents heard references by Kansas City mobsters Carl Tuffy DeLuna and Carl Savella talking about the skim and the mob's secret interests in Las Vegas casinos. The conversations the feds picked up sparked a 5-year-long investigation into the mob's skimming operations at Las Vegas casinos. The investigation led the feds right to Tony Spilotro and leaders of the Chicago outfit and mob families in Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Kansas City. And in October of 1983, Federal indictments were unsealed, and in January of 1986, many were convicted. In early 1983, the feds confirmed that since 1974, Stardust and Fremont Casino employees were working on behalf of the mob bosses, skimming from table games and slots using phony paperwork. It was estimated that a staggering $5 million a year was being siphoned off over an 11-year period, and that's over $50 million. The men convicted of skimming nearly $2 million from Las Vegas casinos were bosses Joey Iuppa, Jackie Cerrone, Angelo LaPetria, Joey Lombardo, Milwaukee boss Frank Ballestieri, Cleveland mobster Carl DeLuna, the number 2 Kansas City boss Carl Savella, the Kansas City capo Peter Tamburello, and a couple of others all went to prison. And the time had come for the bosses to make a decision on who was responsible and who would be held accountable for all of this loss in manpower and millions of dollars of lost revenue suffered by the outfit and other mob families across the country. Outfit leaders' rage was now focused on who was responsible for exposing the skim in Las Vegas. In 1954, Tony's father, Pasquale, suffered a fatal aneurysm and passed away, leaving his mother, Antoinette, to raise their 6 sons, Patrick, John, Robert, Victor, Tony, and Michael. That same year, Tony dropped out of Steinmetz High School. He was a sophomore. Spilotro and boyhood friend Frank Collada started their criminal careers together as teenagers. They were pulling off petty thefts and burglaries. Over the years, Tony and 3 of his brothers, Michael, Victor, and John, became involved with the outfit. Only Tony and Victor would become made members, and Michael and John became associates and members of the infamous Las Vegas Hole-in-the-Wall gang. But Robert remained a law-abiding citizen, and Patrick became a highly respected oral surgeon here in Chicago. By Tony's 21st birthday, he had been arrested 13 times. And after his father's death, his mentor sadly became Mad Sam DiStefano, an outfit enforcer that even the outfit guys and cops feared. At first, Tony only saw the glamorous side of the outfit, the cars, clothes, and money, but would soon learn what life was really like inside the outfit. In 1959, Sam took a liking to Tony, and in 1961 found him reliable enough to bring him into the outfit fold. Mad Sam DiStefano introduced Tony to feared hitman and Giancana underboss Felix Milwaukee Phil Aldericio and his partner Charles Chucky Nicoletti. These 3 were mentors to the young Tony Spilotro. Tony was an apprentice during the M&M murders of Miraglia and McCarthy. It was Aldericio that showed Tony how to torture people until their eye pops out. Aldericio taught Tony how to use the vise, and Mad Sam taught him how to use the blowtorch. This is how they got answers. It was said Tony accompanied them at least once or twice in the famous and feared Hitmobile. These guys were stone-cold killers and were feared hitmen within the 6 outfit crews for over 2 decades. Between Milwaukee Phil, Mad Sam, and Chucky Nicoletti, Tony was being trained by 3 of the outfit's most prolific killers. What they introduced Tony to was the new road he would travel down for the rest of his life. Tony met Nancy Stewart, a waitress at a local mob hangout, and he married her in 1960 and bought a house around the corner from Sam Giancana's home. And years later, they adopted a son named Vincent. Over this time period, Tony established relationships with Sam Giancana, Jackie Cerrone, Gus Alex, Joey Iupa, Vincent Insero, and Joey Lombardo. Lombardo was the capo of the Grand Avenue crew, and years later would become his boss. When Tony was a kid, he lived 2 blocks from Lefty Rosenthal, and while he was attempting to move up the outfit ladder, Lefty Rosenthal reportedly saved Spilotro's life one night after West Side mob boss Fiore Fifi Buccieri began strangling Spilotro after he mouthed off to him. Rosenthal talked Buccieri out of it. After that, Tony and Lefty became close friends and associates. Tony Spilotro was now part of the DeStefano crew, and in 1961, Mad Sam's top juice loan enforcer, Action Jackson, was tortured and murdered by Sam, Tony, and others. And in 1962, Spilotro was part of the crew sent to take out Jimmy Miraglia and later Billy McCarthy for the vicious murders of the Scalvo brothers and an innocent waitress that was with them. The bosses were outraged by these murders, and soon justice would be served. Spilotro was part of the crew that murdered these two in an especially vicious way under the supervision of feared hitmen Felix Aldericio and Charles Nicoletti. In 1963, DeStefano loan shark and real estate agent Leo Foreman was viciously murdered by Tony Spilotro and Sam DeStefano and others because he disrespected Sam. Tony the Ant Spilotro became a made man in 1963 at age 25. This was unheard of in the outfit at the time, and is surely because of his participation in multiple killings throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s. Then the bosses sent Spilotro to Miami to work with bookmaker Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Rosenthal was sent to Miami to control the outfit's gambling interests there, and Spilotro was there to see that things ran smoothly and nobody tried to muscle in on their operations. By 1967, Spilotro was back in Chicago full-time, and he was rewarded with his own West Side bookmaking operation that he was running out of the house he had just bought right around the corner from Sam Giancana. And the feds got wind, and IRS agents raided the house and caught him red-handed, and nothing but a fine came of it. And in 1968, Tony moved the gambling operation to the basement of an abandoned warehouse. And in 1969, Chicago Vice cops raided Tony's operation again. In 1971, Rica Anicardo decided to replace Las Vegas enforcer Marshall Caifano with Tony Spilotro. This was a good thing for Spilotro because it would cool things down a bit more at home concerning his law enforcement troubles. With Tony Spilotro going to Vegas, Vegas had no idea what they were in for. Tony arrived in Las Vegas in 1971 and moved there in 1972. He would join his longtime friend Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Lefty was an expert odds maker connected to the Cicero crew, and for them he ran the biggest illegal bookmaking operation in the United States. After a couple of years in Miami with Spilotro, Lefty was sent by the bosses in '67 to Las Vegas to set up the skim. Spilotro was sent there to protect the man in charge of the skim, and the bosses made it clear to Spilotro: protect the skim and the guy running it. At first, Tony tried to blend into the Vegas background by buying a gift shop in the Circus Hotel and Casino. And over his first few months in town, he started to realize there was no one operating any organized street rackets in Vegas. So he immediately went to work organizing a complete takeover of these rackets, which had been overlooked by the other crime families operating in Vegas. And there was a reason why, and he would find out why 7 years later. So he ignored what the bosses told him and brought in Herbie Blitzstein to get everything organized. In 1972, the past Tony wanted to distance himself from quickly came back to bite him in the ass. Tony, Mad Sam DiStefano, and Sam's brother Mario were indicted for the 1963 Leo Foreman murder. The FBI turned DiStefano crew member Chucky Cromaldi, and he testified against all three. The bosses did not want to risk a trial with Mad Sam. They were sure he would create a spectacle of himself. And also Spilotro didn't want this big mouth screwing up his trial. So the bosses decided Mad Sam had to go. And Tony gladly took the contract. He blew Mad Sam away with a shotgun in his garage, assisted by Sam's brother Mario DiStefano. And by 1973, Tony skated and secured an acquittal through using his brother John to help concoct a false alibi. And because of this, the jury found Tony Spilotro not guilty. And immediately after this, he went right back to Vegas. By 1974, Tony Spilotro made it known through murder there was a new gangster in town. And to accomplish the street takeover, Spilotro and his crew committed a lot of murders. They were also robbing and killing drug dealers, bookies, and loan sharks that would not fall in line. There were more mob-related murders in 1974 than in the previous 25 years combined. And it was rumored many were buried out in the desert, along with evidence and weapons used in some of these killings. In late 1974, Circus was sold, and Spilotro made 10 times the amount he originally paid for the shop. He bought it for $70,000 and sold it for $700,000. He later had a beautiful house built in Paradise Park. And at this point, life was good for Spilotro in Las Vegas. That's for sure. Over the past 4 years, Tony was living every aspect of the Las Vegas lifestyle. Blow, broads, booze, and gambling. And all of this was fueling his need for more cash. And in 1976, he had a plan. And the time had come to implement the plan. So he recruited childhood friend Frank Collada, the guy who ratted out his burglary crew partners, Miraglia and McCarthy, to Spilotro and the outfit. And this was the guy Tony picked to bring guys in from Chicago to form the burglary crew. In command of the new crew was Michael Spilotro, Herbie Blitzstein, and Frank Collada. After the meeting at the Golden Steer Steakhouse between the four of them, Collada went back to Chicago and organized the gang. In 1978, Tony Spilotro once again decided to go into business for himself, and he opened up his new headquarters, the Gold Rush Jewelry Store. This became his new base of operations for his loan sharking, bookmaking, and fencing operations. And it also became a clubhouse for the hole-in-the-wall gang, and it was perfect for the feds. Through surveillance, they started documenting the comings and goings of crew members. And they also had the inside wired. This was another disastrous move by Tony Spilotro. In early 1978, Tony Spilotro just couldn't help himself. He turned on his longtime friend Lefty Rosenthal and had a public affair with his wife Jerry. And this was not the first time he slept with a friend's wife. This move created tensions in the system the bosses worked so hard to put together, and it pushed it to a breaking point. When the bosses back home got wind of this, nothing was done about it. And it was because the skim was still rolling along, even after the affair ended in 1979. In late 1976, Frank Lefty Rosenthal opened the first sports book at the Stardust Casino. This new innovation cut into Tony's illegal bookmaking operation he was running in Vegas. And this move by Lefty made the bosses happy, because there was more to skim from. Lefty's success could have created a bit of resentment on Tony's part. After all, it was taking money out of his pocket and his crew's pockets. When the members of the Hole in the Wall gang arrived in Las Vegas, Vegas law enforcement was ill-prepared to deal with the crime wave they brought to Vegas. In 1978, Tony Spilotro imported 23 arch criminals from Chicago. Some were killers, others were safecrackers, alarm specialists, and their jobs were to prey on the citizens and tourists and business owners of Las Vegas. The gang earned this nickname because they punched holes in walls or cut through the ceiling to bypass the alarms to make entry to the heists. And these are 14 of the 23 members of the Hole in the Wall gang. Michael Spilotro, Herbie Blitzstein, Frank Culotta, Crazy Larry Newman, Joseph Cusimano, Joe Blaskill, Leonard Giardino, John Spilotro, Ernest Ernie Devano, Wayne Matecki, Paul the Indian Shiro, Paul Peanuts Penzaco, Butch Penzaco, and Pops Penzaco, and Jerry Lisner. And there were also 9 other members of the Hole in the Wall gang. The gang pulled off 450 burglaries. They robbed hundreds of homes and hotel patrons across Vegas for over 3 years, and stole over $4 million. And none of this revenue went back to the bosses. And this was strike one. Because of the violent reputation Spilotro had made for himself in Vegas, in December of 1978, the Nevada Gaming Commission had enough of his shit and put him in Nevada's Black Book. This meant Tony was barred from the casinos, and this made the job he was sent there to do next to impossible. But still, the bosses left him in charge out there, and he had now become completely useless to the outfit's skimming scheme. Others in the Black Book included Spilotro's predecessor, Marshall Caifano, and Kansas City boss Nick Savella, and LA mobster Louis Tom Dragna, and another LA mobster Joe Sicca, and there were many others that made it into the infamous Black Book. The Black Book's purpose was a way for the state of Nevada to run arch criminals out of town. By 1978, just 7 years after Spilotro's arrival in Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department had been completely compromised by Spilotro and his crew. It had become so corrupt, Spilotro had a cop, Joe Blaskill, working as a burglar with the Hole in the Wall gang. The residents in Las Vegas were being pickpocketed, robbed, and shook down by Spilotro's street crew. And the cops just looked the other way, because many of these cops were on his payroll. Cops were being paid off with cash, perks, and comps in all the mob-run hotels. Tony Spilotro greatly miscalculated what he could do in Las Vegas. He thought he could do in Las Vegas what the outfit did in Chicago: initiate political corruption, police corruption, and worst of all, judicial corruption. And all of this was controlled by the outfit bosses. The outfit's control in Chicago prior to 1990 was total. In 1978, a huge scandal hit the Las Vegas Police Department. Las Vegas cops Detective Joe Blaskill and Sergeant Phil Leone were picked up on wiretaps giving Spilotro the names of informants, undercover agents, and FBI surveillance cars. These two bad cops put a lot of lives at risk. They were fired and charged with obstruction of justice and bribery, but charges were eventually dropped. In 1979, the massive corruption in the Las Vegas Police Department set the stage for a new sheriff that ran for office on an anti-corruption platform. John McCarthy became Clark County Sheriff. McCarthy in the Las Vegas branch of the FBI and newly appointed Ken Clifford, the new commander of the Mob Intelligence Unit, immediately went to work cleaning house. A shitload of cops were fired, and because of this, by 1980, law enforcement in Las Vegas became a viable threat to Spilotro's freedom and his street operations. And now all law enforcement groups in the state of Nevada were now focused on Tony Spilotro and his associates. And over the next couple of years, they made life as miserable as possible for him and his crew. Everywhere they went, the cops were there. Their continued presence made it impossible for them to operate. And McCarthy and Ken Clifford didn't take kindly to Spilotro's threats to kill their fellow cops. These cops didn't back down from the outfit. In 1980, two of Clifford's detectives were involved in the shooting death of Chicago mob associate Frankie Blue Bluestein. Bluestein was the son of powerful labor union leader Stevie Blue Bluestein. Cops shot him during a traffic stop. He exited his car with a pizza and a handgun in hand, and the two Vegas cops shot and killed him. A pissed-off Spilotro saw this as an act of war, and his crew responded by shooting up the two cops' homes. And then Spilotro put a hit on the cops that murdered Frankie Blue. After Spilotro declared war on Vegas cops, Clifford had had enough of Spilotro and flew to Chicago with his longtime partner Galen Kester as backup. Clifford turned the tables and decided to declare war on the outfit. Clifford was most likely given the addresses of the outfit leadership by the FBI, and they showed up at Tony Accardo's home first, and then Joey Iupa's house next. And then they also paid a visit to Teamsters financier Allen Dorfman at his office. Clifford knew the bosses would never authorize a hit on two police officers, and the message that was delivered that day to the outfit leadership was clear. If anything happens to any of my men, I will come back here and kill each and every one of you, and everything that moves, walks, or crawls in your homes. The message was understood, and the hit was stopped because Clifford played by their rules. After the visit by Clifford, the bosses were angry, and not at Clifford. They were furious at Spilotro for putting their families at risk. In October of 1979, Jerry Listener, a member of the Hole in the Wall gang, got himself in trouble with the feds. So Listener decided to use Spilotro and his crew as the key to his cell door. He testified in Washington, D.C. before a grand jury about all the crimes he and the Spilotro crew had committed in Las Vegas. And because of the big-mouth lawyer representing Listener, Spilotro and Collada got wind of his treachery, and Tony ordered Collada to get rid of him. Collada shot him multiple times, killing him. Then he dumped his body in his swimming pool. Spilotro had no approval from the bosses in Chicago to kill Listener, and this would become a big problem later for Spilotro with the bosses. In the early 1980s, Tony was publicly running loan sharking operations on the floors of the hotels Lefty was running the skims out of. And this was creating heat from the Gaming Commission. And once again, nothing was done about it by the bosses. Either they didn't know or didn't care, further emboldening Spilotro's unauthorized bad behavior. In July of 1981, days before 6 members of the Hole-in-the-Wall gang were caught in the act robbing Bertha's gifts and home furnishings, Frank Cullotta told Spilotro they were being set up by one of their own. He was warned about this days before they pulled the job at Bertha's, and Spilotro didn't believe it, so he gave the order to go ahead and do it anyway. Frank Cullotta was the ringleader of this operation, and there was over $1 million in cash in Bertha's vault, and the Spilotro crew wanted it all. But there was a problem. Salvatore Sonny Romano, the alarm expert, did rat out the gang to the feds, and on July 4th, 1981, the feds and Metro cops were waiting. And while the fireworks were going off, they worked to gain entry. And as soon as they broke through the roof, cops swarmed and the lookout Cullotta and 5 others, including Joe Blasco, the disgraced former Las Vegas cop, were all arrested. And these are the 6 members of the Hole-in-the-Wall gang caught that night at Bertha's. Frank Cullotta, Crazy Larry Newman, criminal Vegas cop Joseph Blaskill, Leonard Leo Giardino, Ernest Ernie Davino, and Wayne Matecki. Frank Cullotta had now been caught, and in Spilotro's paranoid mind, he was sure Cullotta was now a liability to him, because he knew too much, and Spilotro wanted him taken out because he could not let Cullotta spill the beans to the cops or the bosses back in Chicago about what he was really doing in Las Vegas. Tony and his brothers were planning a takeover of the outfit, and up to this point, Cullotta had kept his mouth shut. Until Cullotta's neighbor was shot. Spilotro botched the hit on him, and because of this, he was left with no choice but to become an FBI informant. And he was now in the hands of the feds. And that spelled big trouble for Tony Spilotro. On October 4th, 1982, Frank Lefty Rosenthal survived a bombing. This happened at Tony Roma's restaurant. It was a regular haunt for Lefty. A bomb was attached to the gasoline tank of his Cadillac Eldorado and was detonated when he started his car. Lefty survived the bombing with minor injuries. The feds claimed Joey Aiuppa wanted him dead and called on Milwaukee mob boss Frank Ballestieri. Ballestieri was known as the Mad Bomber. He was heard on an FBI wiretap, blaming Rosenthal for the legal problems the casinos were having. Lefty and Spilotro put 4 gaming licenses in jeopardy, partly because of Lefty's recently discovered criminal background and his connection to feared outfit enforcer Tony Spilotro. Aiuppa and Ballestieri were angry because of Lefty's ridiculous TV show that he was using to attack Harry Reid and the Nevada Gaming Commission. Just weeks before the bombing, Ballestieri told his sons he intended to get full satisfaction for Rosenthal's crap. Tony Spilotro could have assisted Ballestieri in setting up the bombing, and to this day, no one has been charged in connection with this bombing. 1983, Spilotro heard about the murder of his friend, Allen Dorfman, and after this he knew things were getting out of control. And I think he realized he could be next, because when the outfit whacked their top money man, it sent a message that nobody involved in the skim was safe from the wrath of the bosses in Chicago. In 1983, Frank Cullotta testified against Tony Spilotro in the M&M murders case, but a Cook County judge found Spilotro not guilty. And by coincidence, the trial judge, Thomas J. Maloney, was convicted in 1992 for taking bribes, and he fixed 3 murder cases. 17 other judges were also arrested and convicted in Operation Greylord. And this is one example of how much pull the outfit had in Chicago's justice system. And right after this big court victory for Spilotro, bad news came when the Stardust skim indictments were announced. And 15 arrests were made, including Spilotro. In 1983, Spilotro had a heart attack and was taken out of the skim trial. Some were convicted and others pled guilty, except Tony. In 1984, Spilotro underwent bypass surgery. The stress of the Las Vegas lifestyle and court case after court case had finally caught up with him. Alan Glick testified against all of them. From 1983 until 1985, Tony laid low, and very few people seen him out in public. In January of 1986, after the imprisonment of acting boss Joe Iuppa, Jackie Cerrone, Angelo LaPetria, and Joey Lombardo, a meeting was held at the Czech Lodge in North Riverside, Illinois. Most of the upper echelon outfit guys were there, including the boss, Tony Accardo. Accardo had decided to temporarily appoint Sam Carlisi as boss. He was replacing Iuppa, and Joe Ferriola became his underboss. Sam Carlisi told the group that Accardo would stay on as consigliere and would have final say in all major decisions, and Gus Alex would stay the head of the connection guys. He went on to the big problem on the agenda, Tony Spilotro. They talked about how things had gone down since he took over in Las Vegas. And enforcer Rocco Infelice said, "Hit him." Everyone else at the meeting agreed, and the wheels were set in motion. And now it was just a matter of when. In 1986, the Berthas trial was one of 3 cases Spilotro was facing. Star witness Frank Collada testified in a 12-week trial against Spilotro. And the judge was unimpressed with Collada's testimony, and because of this, the trial ended in a mistrial. The case was rescheduled for late in June of 1986. And another trial was set for June of 1986, the 1979 murder of Sherwin Listner. But Spilotro would never make it back for either of these trial dates in Las Vegas. 1986 was a bad year for Tony Spilotro. He was facing multiple trials that were draining him financially and taking a toll on his health. In 1985, he stopped sending money back to the bosses in Chicago because he couldn't generate revenue. The feds and the Las Vegas cops had him and his crew pinned down. And all at once it started coming apart at the seams. The hole-in-the-wall gang was done. Lefty was gone. His wife Jerry was dead. The skim was over. And some of the bosses were put in prison. And many of his street operations slowly faded away. Tony was in deep trouble, and he couldn't keep up with the massive pressure of it all. He was becoming completely unhinged, and his behavior was paranoid and erratic. It was all completely consuming him. He had made a mess of everything, that's for sure. And in June of 1986, the new boss, Joe Ferriola, once the leader of the Wild Bunch Killers, summoned Tony back to Chicago. And Tony grudgingly accepted and flew home. Under Tony Accardo and Joey Iuppa, the next generation of mob enforcers and hitmen would emerge. These are just a few. Tony the Ant Spilotro, Frank Collada, Jasper Campisi, John Cattuso, Frank the German Schweiss, Larry Newman, Nick Calabrese, Frank the Breeze Calabrese, Paul the Indian Shiro, Ronnie Jarrett, Tony Calabrese, Joe Scalise, William Butch Petroselli, Anthony Little Tony Borsellino, Jimmy the Ice Pick Inandino, Anthony Tony the Hatchet Caramonte, Johnny Apes Monteleone, Jimmy LaPetria, James Jimmy Light Marcello, Gerald Scarpelli, Mario Ranone, and there are many more just like them. Over the decades, the outfit never had a shortage of killers and violent enforcers ready to act on a moment's notice. The next chapter covers the murders of the Spilotro brothers and the life of Capo Tony Accardo, the longest sitting boss in the history of the American Mafia, and highlights the takeover of outfit-run neighborhoods by the black mega gangs and the drug cartels in the 1970s and 80s.